purpose of this is to get an understanding of the media. All right, how do we create transitional blends using graphite? It's a good starter for working in watercolors because of the way that we use the transparency of the medium to create light and dark values. In this case, we're not doing color values, we're just doing, grayscale values. So the process of developing the values in any one of these is just getting an understanding of how we can create transitional blends using watercolor washes. Okay, that's going to be a term you're going to hear quite a lot, is a wash. A wash of color is a soft transitional blend that could just be a singular area of value, or it could be a transitional area of value like you see here. You do see that some of those areas are created. There are some lines that help separate them, all right, with the values in the background, as well as areas of transition in the structure itself. Some of the areas I did go back in after I did some of the washes with the brush, and I added some more pencil to tighten areas up. So how do we work with the medium? Here's how. First thing I want you to do is I want you to take your praying ovals and I want you to line it up in the upper left-hand corner. I want you to use your pencil and trace all 6 of those ovals right where you see it. And then number them 0 to 5 right below it when you're done. This is going to create a value scale. I use the H pencil, all right? This is going to create a 5-step value scale that you're going to be able to look at and refer to when you work with the Sketch and Wash pencil on your final. Once you trace all 5, the next step is pretty simple, pretty obvious. I suggest starting light. That way you can transition to darker values. 0 obviously is going to be the white of the paper. There are going to be 0 values in your reference. So again, I'm going to hold my pencil all the way at the back here at the little silver cut. And I'm going to use the side of the Sketch and Wash pencil and just carefully, lightly, with the weight of the pencil, fill my first oval. If it goes outside the lines, that's okay. You'll also notice if you use the side, you get a much smoother value than if you use the point. All right? Same thing that we did in exploration when we created our 5-step value scale. Okay? We want smooth gradations, not linear ones. There's a 1 value. Now, know this. Whenever you add water to the graphite, it will get darker. All right? So whatever value you put down, just know that it's going to end up getting a shade maybe too darker. All right, so continue the process again. 2 value, put a little bit more pressure into it. I'm just doing small circular movements. Try to have some variation in tone between the 1 and the 2. And finish the values all the way down to the 5. Same way we did in exploration, by adding pressure and moving our hand down the pencil. So 3, I put it in the middle. All right. On the 5 value, I changed my grip back to a writing grip, but I'm still doing the same movement. So it's not a linear blend. I'm doing the small circle, so it's a smooth area solid blend. And again, you're going to press harder to create a darker value. Now, this is going to give you a pretty quick intro into how you're going to create areas of solid tone. Now, there's not going to be a ton of areas of solid tone. All the surface contours in the skulls create variations in different areas. For example, in here, you can see 2 or 3 different values in any given space. All right, 0 values obviously are going to be 0, but then we go into some of the ones, there's like a 1 and 2 value in here. All right, variations in background tone, variations in ground tone, cast shadows, all of those things. All right, but at least if you have an established gradient 5-step value scale, it's going to make sense. So I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to wet it, make sure there's no color in it, and then take a little of the excess water off on my paper towel. And now I'm just going to smoothly blend out my 1 value. Try to get it nice and soft so it has a similar tone throughout. and then I clean my brush again. Just going to repeat that for all 5. You see how dark that got right there. You can see how it's giving me a fairly smooth, but at the same time, I can pull more graphite to one area of it and create variations or textures within that. And I move on. See, the edge of the brush creates that sharp, dark value because it's pushing the graphite in the bristles down to the tip. When you do the 5 value, you're going to see how dark that's going to get. You can see it, probably notice how easily, with very little water, it creates that rich black. And that gives me a nice 5-step value scale to work from. The next thing I want to do is I want to understand what happens when I create variations. I'm going to show you a couple different techniques. One is, how do I create a smooth transition in value? So I want to create a smooth value scale going the opposite direction. So I take my sketch and wash, I make a dark area of value, and then as I work my way across, I'm going to lighten pressure, creating a singular smooth transitional value scale. If I need a little bit more in the mid-range, I can come back in and add a little bit more in the mid-range. Now, one strong piece of advice, okay? If I'm using the side of the pencil, it's going to be more accurate and smoother. Now, when you add water to any transitional blend, especially one that's a full value scale like this, do not start in the darks. Start in the lights and bring the values to the dark. Same way we just did the process of the first section. So I clean my brush, I start in here in the lights at my 0 value, and then I move into my 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. And I can pull that 5 value out a little further. All right. And you can see that I got that smooth transition that I'm going to label 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Make sure you're cleaning your brush. Now, as I look at the value scales that I've created, I can see visibly all of these values in my reference photo that I'm going to apply in my finished drawing. All right, so the third section here, what I want to do is I want to recreate just a portion of my drawing. And in doing so, I'm just going to kind of sketch out a little bit of the form. Keep my lines light. All right, now, this area in here, you notice there's not a lot of strong contrast in value. I don't have any sharp edges of separation like I do up here. So I have soft, subtle ones. I'm not going to put any values in here. I'm going to put a couple little marks in there that kind of show some of those cracks and some of the movement there. I'm going to look up here and I'm going to see that I have the edge of the eye socket. I'm going to put that in. That does have a little bit more of a distinct edge of separation. And then inside there I can see that I've got some fairly significant values. So I'm going to put those in lightly at first. And I notice I've got a highlight here against the shadow. So I got a highlight, shadow, and a shadow. I want all of my lines to disappear and become tone against tone. And looking at inside the eye, I can see I got a little bit of a darker value in there. I've got a little bit of a darker value up in here. And then in between those areas, I've got some medium tones. But I want to put those tones in following the direction and adding and subtracting a similar value. You notice how dark things got as soon as we added water. So I don't want to get too dark in light areas. So these are like 2s and 3s in here. So when I put the 2s and 3s in, I got to remember that I got to put them in lightly because they're going to get a couple shades darker. All right, I got some details that I'm going to put in here. going to put a little bit of tone in between the teeth because I can see that there's some values in there. All right, and the cast shadow below. I want to get the cast shadow below to be a little bit darker, and it's going to transition out away from the form. So it's going to be dark up against this edge, transition out, and it gets a little bit darker in some areas. I can add and subtract pressure. Small section of it drawn in. Now what I want to do, to match some of these things, always work light to dark. So if I'm working light to dark, I can see that I've got these like a 1 and varied 2 values in here. There's a technique called wet and wet, where you take clean water, and I'm going to put the clean water in first. So take a little bit off. I'm going to put the clean water in up against, not right up against it so I'm making any blending, but I'm just putting an area of just wet surface in so that when I start going in with the graphite, it's going to be really smooth and soft. So it's just clean water. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sketch and Wash. Over here, I'm like a paintbrush. I'm going to create an area of value that's going to be used like paint or like a source of color. So now I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to work into that to try to get a nice light value like I've got there. Now when I go into the wetness, look how soft that is. It's going to create a nice soft flowing value. I can't have too much water, obviously, because the paper will start to disintegrate. But you can see how that really creates a nice smooth value throughout to create those edges of separation where there's no sharpness. Just a soft blend in that area there. Areas where I need to get a little bit darker, not a problem. I just get my water, get some graphite, and I can come back in. Like I can see right in here, there's a little bit darker. All right, so basically just painting with the graphite. Down here might be some areas a little darker. I just grab some more graphite and put it in. But remember too, guys, this is a painting. All right, it doesn't have to be photorealistic. You're going to have visible areas of brush stroke. All right, but I can then clean my brush and soften those edges. Now as I go into the areas where I have graphite, obviously if I go into the dark and then work out from that, you see how dark that is? Again, work light to dark. So if I'm coming into the light areas, I can hit those light areas and then soften as I go. And I can use what I have in those medium darks to transition the edges of separation out here, maybe take a little bit off, and then just blend and slowly pull. You see that little bleed right there? That's always fun when you get that. The graphite just kind of bleeds and creates a fun little effect. Here, I got that shape. I'm just going to hit it and leave that little bit of a puddling. I'll just grab a little bit of water from there and let it transition down. See how it kind of bleeds down and creates that one value. And then of course I have, some textures in here. I painted around this. When I get to the teeth, I'm going to do the same thing. Down along the jawline with the dark, come in and grab some water, come into it this way, and I can pull it out from there. Pull it away. Now when I get into the teeth, right around here, I can just soften that edge, right? Soften that up, and then I can use a little bit of what I have on the brush to create any shadows or textures on the teeth themselves. All the while still softening the area around it and using what I have on the brush to put in any of the detailing around it. Pull that shadow. Soften areas that need to be softened. All right, that should give you a good practice of working on doing some detailing. Once this is dry, I can even come back in, or even while it's damp, I can come back in, and if there's areas of texture, I can put some cracks in on top. Some marks, light marks that even as I'm using the pencil, it's starting to blend because it's a damp surface. All right, so you got the wet and wet technique, where you put the wet water down first and then go over top, and you have the overlap technique where you're blending what you've done with the graphite.